The first drops of rain began falling on Cedar Falls just as Harold Winters finished mopping the church floors. At 73, his movements were deliberate and careful, each step echoing in the empty sanctuary. The weathered janitor had been caring for St. Matthew's Episcopal Church for nearly 40 years, and he knew every creak of the old wooden building. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the stained glass windows that depicted scenes of biblical compassion. Harold paused, listening to the storm's growing intensity. Weather reports had warned of a severe system moving through the area, but living in rural Montana meant being prepared for nature's unpredictability. He gathered his cleaning supplies, storing them in the small closet near the altar. The church felt peaceful in the evening hours, filled with the lingering scent of old wood and candle wax. Harold had always found solace here, especially since his wife Martha passed 5 years ago. Thunder rumbled overhead as he checked the windows, ensuring they were properly latched. The storm was arriving faster than predicted. Rain now pelted the roof with increasing force, creating a steady drumming that filled the sanctuary. Harold lived in a small apartment above the church office, an arrangement that suited both him and Pastor Williams perfectly. The elderly janitor served as an unofficial guardian of the building, and his presence provided security for the congregation's peace of mind. As he prepared to lock up for the night, Harold noticed the parking lot lights flickering in the wind. The storm was becoming fierce, with rain now falling in sheets across the empty streets of Cedar Falls. He said a quiet prayer for anyone caught traveling in such weather. Little did Harold know that 3 strangers were fighting their way through the storm, seeking shelter from the relentless downpour that would soon bring them to his door. 20 miles outside Cedar Falls, Jake Morrison gripped his Harley's handlebars as rain stung his face like needles. The leather cut bearing his club's colors was soaked through, and visibility had dropped to nearly 0. Behind him, his brothers Tommy and Rico struggled to keep their bikes steady on the increasingly treacherous highway. The Iron Horse Brotherhood wasn't the largest motorcycle club in Montana, but they commanded respect wherever they rode. Jake, their road captain, had been leading rides for 15 years, but this storm caught them completely off guard during their return from a charity run in Billings. What started as scattered showers had evolved into a dangerous deluge. The 3 bikers had been riding for hours, their destination still 30 miles away. Jake's radio crackled with static as Tommy's voice cut through the interference, barely audible over the storm's roar. Lightning illuminated the road ahead, revealing a small town's lights in the distance. Cedar Falls wasn't on their planned route, but continuing in these conditions would be suicide. Jake signaled to his brothers, pointing toward the town's welcoming glow. The trio downshifted, their engines rumbling as they navigated the slick streets. Most businesses were closed, their windows dark against the storm. The bikers needed shelter desperately, somewhere to wait out the worst of the weather before continuing their journey home. Jake spotted the church steeple rising above the other buildings, its cross barely visible through the rain. Churches sometimes offered sanctuary to travelers in need, though he wasn't sure how welcoming the congregation would be to 3 leather-clad bikers arriving in the middle of the night. Still, they had few options. The storm showed no signs of abating, and hypothermia was becoming a real concern. Jake made the decision, leading his brothers towards St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, hoping for compassion from strangers. Harold was climbing the stairs to his apartment when the knocking began. 3 sharp raps echoed through the church, followed by a pause, then 3 more. He stopped, listening carefully. The sound came again, more insistent this time, cutting through the storm's constant noise. Visitors at this hour were unusual, especially during such severe weather. Harold descended the stairs slowly, his arthritis protesting with each step. The knocking continued, patient but persistent, suggesting genuine need rather than mischief. Through the frosted glass of the church's front door, Harold could make out three dark figures huddled against the elements. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating their silhouettes and revealing motorcycles parked nearby. His heart quickened slightly, not from fear, but from concern for their safety in the storm. Harold had lived long enough to understand that appearances could be deceiving. During his 4 decades of church service, he'd encountered people from all walks of life seeking help, comfort, or simply a moment of peace. The church's mission was clear: offer sanctuary to those in need. He unlocked the heavy wooden door and pulled it open. 3 men stood before him, their leather jackets dripping, helmets tucked under their arms. Rain continued to pour behind them, creating small rivers in the parking lot. Despite their intimidating appearance, Harold noticed something in their eyes that spoke of desperation rather than danger. The oldest of the 3, a man with graying temples and weathered features, stepped forward slightly. Water dripped from his beard as he met Harold's gaze. The janitor could see exhaustion and cold in the stranger's face, along with something else: uncertainty about how they would be received. Harold made his decision in that moment, guided by the same compassion that had sustained him through decades of service. He stepped back, opening the door wider, and spoke the words that would change everything. "Come in out of the rain," Harold said simply, his voice carrying the warmth that had comforted countless parishioners over the years. The 3 bikers exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the elderly man's immediate acceptance. Jake stepped forward first, removing his soaked bandana. "Sir, we don't want to impose. We're just looking for somewhere to wait out this storm. Our bikes are struggling in these conditions, and it's not safe to continue riding." Harold studied the man's face, noting the respect in his voice despite his rough appearance. "I'm Harold Winters, the church janitor, and you're welcome here as long as you need shelter. That's what churches are for." The 3 men entered gratefully, water pooling at their feet on the worn wooden floor Harold had just cleaned. Tommy, the youngest of the group, looked around the sanctuary with obvious awe. The stained glass windows, even in the dim light, created a peaceful atmosphere that seemed to calm his nerves. Rico, built like a linebacker with arms covered in tattoos, nodded respectfully toward the altar. "Thank you, sir. We appreciate your kindness. I'm Rico, this is Tommy, and that's Jake. We're with the Iron Horse Brotherhood." Harold had heard of motorcycle clubs, of course, though he'd never encountered members personally. The media often portrayed them negatively, but these men seemed genuine in their gratitude and respectful of the sacred space. "There are some old blankets in the supply closet," Harold offered, "and I can make coffee if you'd like. The storm should pass by morning, according to the weather service." Jake shook his head. "We don't want to put you out, Mr. Winters. Just letting us stay dry is more than enough." But Harold was already moving toward the closet, his mind made up. Hospitality was a cornerstone of his faith, and these travelers needed more than just shelter from the rain. Within an hour, the unlikely group sat in the church's small fellowship hall, warming their hands around steaming mugs of coffee. Harold had insisted on sharing what he had, producing not only blankets but also sandwiches from his modest kitchen upstairs. The storm continued its assault outside, but inside the church, an unexpected camaraderie was developing. Jake found himself telling Harold about their charity ride, how the Iron Horse Brotherhood raised money for children's hospitals throughout the region. "People see the leather and the bikes and make assumptions," Jake explained, his voice thoughtful. "But most of us are just working guys who happen to love riding. We've got teachers, mechanics, veterans in our club. Tommy here is studying to be a paramedic." Tommy nodded, his earlier nervousness replaced by genuine conversation. "My dad always said you judge people by their actions, not their appearance. Mr. Winters, what you've done tonight, opening your church to strangers, that says everything about your character." Harold smiled, remembering similar words from his late wife. Martha used to say the same thing. She believed everyone deserved compassion, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Rico, who had been quietly observing the church's interior, finally spoke. "This is a beautiful place. You can feel the peace here. How long have you been taking care of it?" 40 years this December, Harold replied with pride. "Started when I was 33, right after Martha and I moved to Cedar Falls. She helped with the flowers and Sunday school until she passed." The conversation continued as the storm raged outside. Harold learned about their families, their struggles, and their brotherhood. In return, he shared stories of the church's history, the community it served, and the quiet satisfaction he found in his work. As the night wore on, the barriers between them dissolved completely, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. Harold woke before sunrise, as was his habit. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind the fresh scent of rain-washed air. He dressed quietly and descended to the sanctuary, expecting to find his guests still sleeping on the makeshift beds they'd arranged in the fellowship hall. Instead, he discovered the 3 bikers already awake, carefully folding the blankets they'd used. Their leather jackets hung neatly over chairs, drying from the previous night's soaking. Jake looked up as Harold entered, offering a grateful smile. "Morning, Mr. Winters. We wanted to clean up before we left. Didn't want to leave you with extra work after all your kindness." Harold was touched by their consideration. "There's no rush. The roads might still be slick from the rain." Tommy was examining one of the stained glass windows more closely, admiring the craftsmanship. "These are incredible. How old are they?" "Installed in 1952, Harold replied proudly. "The congregation saved for 3 years to afford them." "That one there depicts the Good Samaritan. Seemed appropriate given last night's circumstances." Rico chuckled, except in this case, the Samaritan was helping the travelers, not the other way around. As they prepared to leave, Jake pulled Harold aside. "Mr. Winters, what you did last night meant more than you know. Most people wouldn't have opened their doors to us, especially not their church." Harold shook his head. "Any decent person would have done the same." "No, sir, they wouldn't have." "But that's what makes you special." Jake paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I'd like to ask you something. Our club is having our annual memorial ride next weekend, honoring brothers we've lost. Would you consider offering a blessing for the riders?" Harold was surprised but honored by the request. "I'd be happy to, though I should mention I'm not ordained, just the janitor." Jake smiled. "Sometimes the janitor has more wisdom than the preacher." After the bikers left, Harold went about his usual morning routine, but his mind kept returning to the previous night's encounter. He'd expected never to see Jake, Tommy and Rico again, yet something told him their paths would cross once more. Pastor Williams arrived for his usual Thursday morning sermon preparation and immediately noticed Harold's unusually cheerful demeanor. The elderly janitor rarely spoke about his personal life, but today he seemed eager to share his story. "3 bikers?" Pastor Williams repeated, his eyebrows raised. "Here in the church?" Harold nodded, describing the storm, the unexpected visitors, and the meaningful conversations that followed. "They were good men, Pastor, respectful, grateful, and genuinely caring. It reminded me why we keep these doors open." Pastor Williams listened thoughtfully. He'd known Harold for 15 years and trusted the janitor's judgment implicitly. If Harold said these men were worthy of sanctuary, then they were. Word of the unusual overnight guests spread through Cedar Falls with the speed that only small-town gossip could achieve. By afternoon, Harold had fielded calls from several congregation members, their reactions ranging from concern to curiosity. Mrs. Henderson, the church treasurer, expressed worry about security. "Harold, you can't just let strangers into the church at night." What if they'd been dangerous? But Harold's faith in his decision remained unshaken. They needed help, and we provided it. That's what churches are supposed to do. Others in the congregation were more supportive. Old Tom Bradley, a Korean War veteran, understood the value of judging people by their actions rather than their appearance. Sounds like you did right, Harold. Takes courage to open your door to strangers. And as the week progressed, Harold found himself looking forward to the memorial ride Jake had mentioned. He'd never blessed motorcycles before, but the idea of honoring fallen riders appealed to his sense of service and compassion. The following week passed quickly as Harold prepared for the memorial ride. He researched the Iron Horse Brotherhood online, discovering their extensive charity work and community involvement. Far from the dangerous gang portrayed in movies, they appeared to be a legitimate organization dedicated to brotherhood and service. Pastor Williams offered to handle the blessing ceremony himself, but Harold politely declined. Jake asked me specifically, Pastor. I think it's important to honor that request. Harold spent time crafting appropriate words for the occasion, drawing inspiration from biblical passages about journey, protection, and remembrance. He wanted to honor both the fallen riders and the living brotherhood that continued their legacy. On Friday evening, Jake called to confirm the details. We'll arrive around 10 Saturday morning, Mr. Winters. Should be about 30 riders total. Just our local chapter and a few friends from neighboring clubs. Harold assured him everything was ready. He'd arranged with Pastor Williams to use the church parking lot and had prepared a simple but meaningful ceremony. The weather forecast called for clear skies, perfect riding conditions. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and crisp autumn air. Harold woke early, as usual, but felt an unusual excitement about the day ahead. He dressed carefully, choosing his best shirt and tie for the occasion. As he prepared the church grounds, Harold reflected on the unexpected turn his life had taken. A week ago, he'd been a simple janitor, going about his routine duties. Now he was about to bless a motorcycle memorial ride, bridging two worlds that rarely intersected. The sound of approaching engines reached his ears around 9:30, earlier than expected. Harold stepped outside to see a small group of motorcycles turning into the church parking lot. Jake led the procession, followed by Tommy and Rico, just as they'd arrived a week earlier. But this time, they weren't seeking shelter from a storm. Harold watched in amazement as motorcycle after motorcycle filled the church parking lot. What Jake had described as about 30 riders was clearly a significant underestimation. The procession seemed endless, with bikes arriving from multiple directions. Jake parked near the church entrance and approached Harold with a broad smile. "Mr. Winters, I hope you don't mind, but word spread about what you did last week. Seems like more folks wanted to participate than we expected." Harold looked out over the growing crowd, his eyes widening. Riders continued to arrive, their engines creating a thunderous symphony that echoed off the church walls. Men and women of all ages dismounted their bikes, many wearing leather vests adorned with patches from various clubs and organizations. "How many are we expecting?" Harold asked, trying to hide his nervousness. Rico approached, grinning widely. "Well, sir, last count we had about 900 confirmed riders. Could be more before we're done." Harold's jaw dropped. 900. The small church parking lot was already overflowing, with riders parking along the street and in the adjacent field. He'd prepared for a small, intimate ceremony, not a massive gathering that would dwarf anything Cedar Falls had ever seen. Tommy appeared at his elbow, sensing Harold's overwhelm. "Don't worry, Mr. Winters. These are all good people. Word got out about your kindness, and everyone wanted to show their respect. You've become something of a legend in the riding community." As Harold surveyed the incredible scene unfolding before him, he noticed something remarkable. Despite the massive crowd, the atmosphere remained respectful and orderly. Riders spoke in hushed tones, clearly understanding they were on sacred ground. The elderly janitor felt a mixture of pride and humility wash over him. His simple act of kindness had somehow sparked something much larger than he'd ever imagined possible. The residents of Cedar Falls began emerging from their homes and businesses as the rumble of hundreds of motorcycles filled the air. What they witnessed defied every stereotype and preconception they'd held about bikers and motorcycle clubs. The riders had organized themselves with military precision. Volunteers directed parking, ensuring emergency vehicle access remained clear. Others distributed bottled water and helped elderly spectators find good viewing positions. The respect shown for both the church property and the local community was unmistakable. Mayor Patricia Collins arrived, initially concerned about crowd control and potential disturbances. Instead, she found herself greeting Jake and other club leaders who approached her with courtesy and professionalism. "Ma'am, we want to ensure we're not causing problems for your town," Jake explained. "We've brought our own security and we'll clean up completely before we leave. This is about honoring our fallen brothers and the man who showed us kindness." Harold stood near the church steps, watching the transformation of his quiet town. Children pressed against storefront windows, their eyes wide with excitement. Adults who'd initially seemed wary began approaching the riders, engaging in friendly conversations. Mrs. Henderson, the church treasurer who'd expressed concern about security, found herself chatting with a female rider who turned out to be a retired school principal. The woman's motorcycle was decorated with small American flags and photos of fallen veterans. Pastor Williams arrived and immediately sought out Harold. "This is incredible," he said, surveying the scene. "I've never seen anything like it." Harold nodded, still somewhat stunned by the magnitude of the gathering. "Neither have I, Pastor. But look at their faces. This isn't about showing off or making noise. This is about respect and remembrance." As the ceremony time approached, the massive crowd began to organize itself naturally, forming a large semicircle around the church steps where Harold would deliver his blessing. At exactly 10 o'clock, Jake stepped forward and raised his hand. The crowd of nearly 1,000 people fell silent with remarkable speed, demonstrating the respect and discipline that defined their community. Harold felt his nervousness fade, replaced by a sense of purpose and honor. "Brothers and sisters," Jake's voice carried clearly across the gathering, "we're here today to honor those who've ridden their last mile and to thank the man who reminded us what true hospitality looks like. Mr. Harold Winters opened his church to 3 strangers in a storm, and in doing so, opened our hearts to something greater." Harold stepped forward, his prepared notes forgotten. Instead, he spoke from the heart, his voice growing stronger with each word. "When I opened those church doors last week, I was simply doing what felt right. I had no idea it would lead to this incredible gathering. But standing here now, I understand something important. We're all travelers on life's highway, and we all need shelter from the storms we face." The crowd listened intently as Harold continued. "Today, we remember those who've completed their journey, riders who lived with passion, loyalty, and brotherhood. Their memory lives on in each of you, in the bonds you share and in the kindness you show to others." Harold raised his hands in blessing. "May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May you find shelter when storms arise, and may you always remember that every stranger might be an angel in disguise. Ride safely, ride with honor, and carry the memory of your fallen brothers with you always." The silence that followed was profound and moving. Then slowly, the sound of engines beginning filled the air. Not the aggressive roar of departure, but a gentle rumbling that served as a mechanical prayer, a tribute to those being remembered. Harold felt tears in his eyes as he witnessed the power of community and remembrance. As the memorial ride prepared to depart, something unexpected happened. Instead of simply leaving, many riders approached Harold personally, shaking his hand and expressing their gratitude. Each interaction revealed another layer of the community he'd unknowingly joined. A Vietnam veteran named Sam shared how the Brotherhood had helped him through PTSD. A young woman named Maria explained how the club supported her after her husband's death in Afghanistan. An elderly rider named Frank described the charity work they did for local food banks. Harold listened to each story with growing amazement. These weren't the dangerous outlaws portrayed in popular media. They were teachers, mechanics, nurses, veterans, and retirees united by their love of riding and their commitment to each other. Jake approached as the crowd began to thin. "Mr. Winters, I have something for you." He handed Harold a leather vest, similar to those worn by club members, but bearing a special patch. "Honorary Brother, Iron Horse Brotherhood." Harold examined the vest with wonder. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Rico added, joining the conversation. "You've already shown us everything we need to know about your character." Tommy appeared with a framed photograph, a picture of Harold blessing the riders, captured by one of the club's photographers. "We wanted you to have this, to remember today." As the last of the motorcycles prepared to leave, Harold stood on the church steps, wearing his new vest and holding his photograph. The quiet janitor who'd simply offered shelter from a storm had become an honorary member of one of the region's most respected motorcycle brotherhoods. Pastor Williams joined him, both men watching as the final riders departed with waves and honks of farewell. "Harold," the pastor said quietly, "I think you've just experienced what ministry really looks like." Harold nodded, understanding that his life had been forever changed by a simple act of kindness. In the weeks that followed, Harold's story spread far beyond Cedar Falls and the motorcycle community. Local newspapers picked up the tale, then regional outlets, and eventually national media discovered the heartwarming story of the elderly janitor and the bikers. But for Harold, the real impact was much more personal. The Iron Horse Brotherhood had adopted St. Matthew's Episcopal Church as their unofficial spiritual home. Members regularly stopped by to check on Harold, help with maintenance projects, and contribute to the church's various charitable efforts. The congregation initially worried about the church's new reputation, but they quickly discovered that the bikers brought more than just noise and leather. Donations increased significantly, volunteer participation grew, and the church's community outreach programs expanded beyond anything they'd previously imagined. Harold found himself with a new extended family. Jake, Tommy, and Rico became regular visitors, often joining him for coffee and conversation. Other club members sought his counsel on personal matters, treating the elderly janitor as a wise elder brother. The memorial ride became an annual tradition, growing larger each year as word spread throughout the motorcycle community. Harold's blessing was considered essential to the ceremony, and he took great pride in honoring the fallen riders and their families. On quiet evenings, Harold would sit in the sanctuary and reflect on how dramatically his life had changed. A simple decision to offer shelter had opened doors he'd never imagined, creating connections that transcended age, appearance, and social boundaries. Martha would have loved this, he often thought. She'd always believed in the power of kindness to transform lives. Harold had discovered that sometimes the person most transformed is the one doing the kindness. As he locked up the church each night, Harold would smile at the sound of distant motorcycles on the highway, knowing that somewhere out there, his brothers were riding safely home.